Une minute? 1 minute? Jeff, tu pannes-tu ou tu restes centré?
Je vais rester centré.
OK, c'est bon.
So Paul, you're going to be on the one side of me.
We'll go in about 1 minute.
So should I go on the other side since I'm going to start closing?
You choose what side you want. He's on the other side. And then I'll just move back. I tend not to, but you know, I tend to want to look like I'm just. Are we ready?
Enough questions.
You're okay.
All right, heads up. You go.
Welcome to the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition press conference. My name is Alex Schadenberg. I'm the Executive Director of the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition. We have two esteemed physicians speaking about their research and experience concerning the extension of MAiD to people with mental illness alone. That is currently scheduled to happen on March 17th, 2027 in Canada. We have Dr. Peter Bluzanovic from Montreal, who's a physician for 30 years caring for people in psychiatric care in Montreal, as I said, and Dr. Paul Saba, a family physician from Lachine, Quebec. I'm going to start with Dr. Peter for his comments.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Dr. Peter Bluzanovic. I'm a family physician in Montreal who has been practicing for over 30 years. I have experienced helping patients in offices, in emergency rooms, and in mental health institutions. And I have treated many with mental illnesses in these settings. And that's why I'm here today. I want to provide a voice for our most vulnerable, those who have and are suffering from mental illness. Bill C-218 needs to pass to put a stop to euthanasia for people with mental illness. Basic needs are currently not being met in our healthcare system. Without this bill, we are condoning a bypass towards suicide and blatantly admitting defeat. Mental illness needs to be properly identified and treated. These individuals do not want to die, they want their sufferings to be relieved. But there is current lack of medical support, such as physicians, psychologists, social workers. There is lack of psychiatric support and long waiting lists to being assessed. There is lack of financial support, lack of housing, lack of economic security, and lack of support from family and loved ones. I will say it again, and I'm here to provide a voice for our most vulnerable. I know that offering medical aid in dying provides no solution. Everyone deserves the right to be treated with dignity and humanity. We are supposed to be a mature and evolved society that needs to take care of its most vulnerable. We need to realize that the lack of proper care in our healthcare systems is not a good enough excuse to offer assisted suicide as a solution. Bonjour. Je m'appelle Dr. Peter Bluzanovic. Je suis médecin de famille à Montréal, où je pratique depuis plus de 30 ans. J'ai eu l'occasion d'aider des patients au cabinet, aux urgences et dans des institutions de santé mentale. Et j'ai soigné de nombreuses personnes atteintes de troubles mentaux dans ces contextes. C'est pourquoi je suis ici aujourd'hui. Je souhaite faire entendre la voix de nos plus vulnérables, ceux qui souffrent ou ont souffert de troubles mentaux. Le projet loi C-218 doit être adopté pour mettre fin à l'euthanasie des personnes atteintes de troubles mentaux. Les besoins fondamentaux ne sont actuellement pas satisfaits dans notre système de santé. Sans ce projet de loi, nous tolérons un contournement menant au suicide et admettons ouvertement notre échec. Les malades mentales doivent être correctement identifiés et traités. Ces personnes ne veulent pas mourir, elles veulent que leur souffrance soit soulagée. Mais il y a actuellement un manque de soutien médical, notamment des médecins, des psychologues, des travailleurs sociaux. Accès au soutien psychiatrique est limité et les listes d'attente sont longues. Il y a un manque de soutien financier, manque de logement, manque de sécurité financière, manque de soutien de la part des familles et leurs proches. Je répète, je suis ici pour donner une voix aux plus vulnérables d'entre nous. Je sais que l'aide médicale à mourir n'apporte aucune solution. Tout le monde a le droit d'être traité avec dignité et humanité. Nous sommes censés être une société mature et évoluée qui se doit de prendre soin de ses membres les plus vulnérables. Nous devons prendre conscience que l'insuffisance de soins dans nos systèmes de santé ne constitue pas une excuse suffisante pour proposer le suicide assisté comme solution. Merci.
Thank you very much. As already stated, Dr. Paul Saba is a family physician in Lachine, Quebec. He's well known for his clinical experience for caring for patients with disabilities and people with difficult health conditions. Dr. Saba.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you, Peter. Well said. People with only a mental disorder will be euthanized as of March 2027. That's next year. This despite the overwhelming evidence that people with mental disorders can be treated and that most psychiatrists cannot determine which patient has an irremediable, which means an irreversible, condition. From a legal standpoint, those with mental disorders requesting euthanasia, which has been euphemistically called medical assistance in dying, do not meet the condition of free and informed consent, because the desire to die in most cases is a symptom of a mental illness. Bill C-218, which will be voted this week in Ottawa, would stop assisted dying for people with mental health disorders as the sole criteria. This bill must be supported by our members of Parliament who care about their citizens and who value life. Lots of times people think, this is not going to affect us because I'm not depressed, I'm not anxious, but it could affect a member of your family. It could affect a daughter, it could affect a sister, a brother. It could affect a neighbor. Dans la plupart des cas, le désir de mourir est un symptôme de maladie mentale. 90% des personnes qui mettent fin à leur jour ont atteint d'un problème mental au moment de leur suicide. La plupart des personnes qui ont tenté ou qui ont réussi à se suicider ne veulent pas mourir. Ils veulent plutôt échapper à leur détresse émotionnelle. Selon une étude de la Harvard School of Public Health, 90% des personnes ayant tenté de suicider sans succès ne sont pas suicidées après le traitement. Avec le bon traitement, le suicide a disparu. According to a Harvard Public Health study, 9 out of 10 people who attempted suicide but were unsuccessful in their attempt did not commit suicide following treatment. With the right treatment, suicide disappeared. One of my patients, let's call her Jody. She couldn't be here today. She asked me to tell her story. In her 20s, she was a mother of 3 small children. She was involved in an abusive relationship. To end her emotional anguish, she attempted suicide by hanging. Her neighbor found her and removed the cord that was around her neck and saved her life. If she had been euthanized, she wouldn't have survived because euthanasia with a legal injection is a guaranteed death. There's no survivors after euthanasia or medical aid in dying. Today, she's in her 50s. She's happy to be alive. She mothered another son in a very good, healthy relationship and has 4 grandchildren. La plupart des personnes atteintes de troubles mentaux ont besoin de soutien psychiatrique, psychologues, travailleurs sociaux, qui sont rares dans notre système de santé publique. Beaucoup vivent dans des situations financières et sociales précaires. Ils ont besoin d'un soutien financier, notamment un logement abordable et une sécurité alimentaire, as my colleague Peter clearly stated, because he's faced with those same challenges with his patients. Au Québec, le délai moyen d'attente entre la référence à un psychiatre et le traitement est 5 mois. In Quebec, where the waiting time to see a psychiatrist after being referred is at least 5 months, and in most cases longer. In the MAiD law next year, a patient after being accepted for euthanasia will have a 3-month waiting period before the lethal injection is given. With an average 5-month waiting time to see a psychiatrist, it's likely that a person will get a call to see the psychiatrist 2 months or longer after having been lethally injected. In addition to psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, we must ensure a wide variety of alternative, not only standard treatments, because not everybody gets their standard treatment. There's hundreds of treatments, different medications, modifications of those. But there's other treatments too, alternatives such as art therapy, music, dance, pet, recreation, other therapies. We must also ensure free medications, affordable housing, and food security. In a study published in Sage Journal last year, 2025, it explored the potential cost savings to governments by expanding medical-assisted dying to include vulnerable groups with mental illnesses. These groups included people with mental health issues, the homeless, drug users, retired elderly, Indigenous communities. We know that all these people have psychiatric or suffer from distress, anxiety. They estimated $1.273 trillion over a period of 20 years between 2027 and 47, with an estimated 2.6 million deaths in these voluntary groups, mostly the mentally ill and the elderly. I quote the authors of the journal, quote, "This cost-saving measure raises significant ethical concerns. Financially incentivizing MAiD could shift healthcare priorities away from providing necessary support, potentially devaluing vulnerable lives and fostering a troubling reliance on assisted deaths as an economic solution." This is what the authors of the journal said. Les personnes atteintes de problèmes de santé mentale ont besoin de soins, de traitement et de soutien. Ils ne doivent pas être euthanasiés. We ask and we plead with our parliamentarians to vote in favor of Bill C-218 and bring an end to euthanasia next year for those with mental health problems.
So I want to express my deepest sympathy to the many families who have loved ones who've died by euthanasia. Canada is surpassing 100,000 deaths by euthanasia this month, a very sad milestone. That's since, of course, legalization. I remember Gaétan Barré, then the Quebec Health Minister, stating in the Quebec National Assembly in 2014 that this would be for extraordinary cases only, likely 100 per year in Quebec. Euthanasia now represents 8% of all deaths in Quebec. Jocelyn Downey, a longtime euthanasia academic, told Canada's Parliamentary Special Joint Committee on Medical Assistance in Dying, that is studying euthanasia for mental illness alone, that Parliament must stick to this March 17th, 2027 timeline and permit euthanasia based on mental illness alone. Downey threatened the committee by stating, what will happen if there is an extension or exclusion is that people will die by suicide. Downey is saying that the answer to suicidal ideation is suicide. And people will die by suicide if they don't have access to euthanasia. The threat that people who are denied euthanasia will die by suicide is a false pressure tactic. The Supreme Court of Canada accepted this suicide argument also in Carter. But they were also wrong. Because if the premise that people will die by suicide if euthanasia is not available to them is correct, then the suicide rate should go down after euthanasia becomes an option for Canadians who are not terminally ill. But Canada's suicide rate has increased. According to Government of Canada's suicide mortality stats, there were 3,978 recorded suicide deaths in 2016, the year that Canada legalized euthanasia. In 2021, there were 3,927 recorded suicide deaths. That's the year that Canada expanded euthanasia to people who are not terminally ill. But in 2023, 2 years after extending euthanasia to people who are not terminally ill, that very group you would think that were avoiding suicide, there were 4,735 reported suicide deaths in Canada, representing a greater than 20% increase over the 2-year period. So I'm not arguing that Canada's increase in suicide was directly related to Canada's expansion of euthanasia, but I am saying that if Jocelyn Downey was correct, the suicide rate should have decreased, whereas in fact it has significantly increased. Canada's had a massive increase in deaths by euthanasia. Health Canada released their 6th annual report last year on November 28th. And this was for the 2024 deaths, and it indicated a 6.9% increase that year. And it said that we had 16,499 reported MAiD euthanasia deaths in 2024. In 2025, we know that euthanasia increased by 7.3% in Ontario. We have the Ontario data. We know it increased by 11% in Alberta. I predict that in 2025, the increase in Canada's euthanasia deaths was probably greater than 7%, with the number of euthanasia deaths being probably approximately, just by doing the math, around 17,700. Clearly, there's no indication that the massive growth in Canadian euthanasia death has resulted in a lower rate of other suicides. Suicide rates do not decrease in jurisdictions that have legalized euthanasia or assisted suicide. How do I know this? Well, I responded in December 2020 to a statement by Senator Stanley Couture, who's a Canadian senator, who said, in jurisdictions such as Belgium and the Netherlands, where assisted death is legal, that suicide rates have decreased. He then stated that there's no link between assisted death and the rate of suicide in jurisdictions where it's legal. The problem with the senator's comments was that they were absolutely wrong. In that article that I responded to him, I explained that there is no jurisdiction that has legalized euthanasia or assisted suicide that over a long period of time have experienced a decrease in suicide deaths. In February 22, bioethicist David Elbert Jones published an article titled, In Europe, Suicides Rise After Right to Die is Legalized. Jones provided a comparison between European countries that have legalized assisted dying, so euthanasia or assisted suicide, and those that have not, and found that countries that have legalized assisted dying experience an increase in suicide rates compared to countries that have not legalized assisted dying, who at that time had generally had a lowering of their suicide rate. In other words, Downey is using a false argument to scaremonger members of Parliament into approving euthanasia for mental illness alone. Downey uses the court decision to uphold her position, but the justices were actually wrong about this, and in fact, they're not experts. The experts are the physicians who deal with the patients who have mental health issues. Minimally speaking, legalizing euthanasia does not lead to a decrease in suicide rates. There's no data that ever would suggest that or prove that. In fact, there seems to be more of a suicide contagion effect in every single jurisdiction. We mourn 100,000 euthanasia deaths in Canada since legalization, and we challenge the federal government not to expand Canada's euthanasia law, but to launch a study by neutral researchers, because currently all the studies that they've launched have been by pro-euthanasia researchers, on the effect of Canada's out-of-control euthanasia regime. As for the Bill C-218, it's actually not being voted on this week. That was delayed. Nonetheless, euthanasia for mental illness alone we believe is absolutely the wrong way to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you, merci. We don't have any questions at the moment. Nous n'avons pas de questions pour le moment. This concludes the press conference. C'est ce qui met fin à cette conférence de presse.
Thank you very much. So we'll just get a couple pictures and we have to go. Okay, you come together.
Yeah.
We look like we like each other. You know?